and welcome back to class. Okay, so today we are talking about CTEs and temp tables in SQL. You see, CTEs and temp table is more like the subqueries we learned in the last class, but you have to learn everything so you can work on the one that you prefer. Okay, so whatever you used subquery for in the last class, you can also use CTE for it, and you can use temp table for it. All right. But sometimes you might prefer to use CTEs instead of subqueries. For me, subqueries looks too complicated sometimes because I'm writing select inside select, and imagine that I'm writing a very long query. I can get confused. But CTE makes it look more readable, and temp table makes life way easier. Okay, so we are going to see how we can use CTE and temp table in this tutorial. You see, sometimes in SQL, your query can get very long and messy and hard to understand, especially when you start combining filtering, aggregation, or joining data. That's where CTE and temp table, also known as temporary table, help. They basically allow you to structure your query in steps. You can reuse the logic and keep your code clean and readable. What is a CTE? Common table expression, also known as CTE, is a temporary result set that you can use inside a larger select, update, or delete statement. It is defined with the with keyword, and it only exists while your main query runs. So let me give you the general syntax for writing a CTE. I said it always starts with a with, right? And then after you write your with, then you're going to specify your CTE name, all right? Then you open a bracket, all right? In the bracket, you're going to write your block of query right here. So let's say I just want to select column 1, column 2. This is the general syntax for CTE, okay? It always starts with a with, and then afterwards you specify whatever name you are giving your temporary table, okay? And then you write as, open your bracket. In the bracket, you're going to write the query that will generate the table that you now want to save into this temporary table name, okay? After you are done specifying all of your query and your condition, you close the bracket that you opened here, and then you now write your main query, all right? In the main query now, it will reference this temporary table that you generated here, and this is the general syntax for CTE. Now let's look at a practical example of CTE in our healthcare data set. In the last class, when I was explaining subqueries, we had this example where we answered this business question to find patients whose billing is higher than the average, right? And this is the subquery that we use to generate answer for the business question. Now we can use CTE to also generate the same result that the subquery will generate. Your subquery will always be in the temporary table. So you're just going to start with, give it a name. You can call it average underscore bill. Let's just call it table, okay? Temporary table. You open your bracket now, and then you specify what will extract the aggregation. That's the subquery. So I can write it inside here. Select the average billing Okay, so now you can see I've written this subquery in the with. So the result from this aggregation will be saved inside this CTE temporary table. So I'll close the bracket. All right, if I run this alone, it's not going to work, okay? I have to write it together with the main query. So below the CTE, I can now write select ID, okay? Then I can say from healthcare. So I can say from healthcare, comma, this table that I have right here, this table name that I have right here. So I can just copy it and put it down here. Okay, so we want to select ID from the healthcare table, which is the general table, and from this table I declared up here, which is the CTE temporary table. So I can now attach a condition. Remember that it's just this query, this subquery that we have here that I'm trying to write the CTE for. Okay. So I'll say where the billing amount is greater than. So instead of writing this subquery, I can just say where the billing amount is greater than. So I can just give this new column a name from the CTE as, let's just call it average underscore bill. So I can just say where this is average. So I forgot to put as here, and that is why I had that red line. So let's run this now and see what we have. So we can see now that it is giving us the same result as we had for this subquery right here. So let's compare this query. We found the patient whose billing is higher than the average. We use subqueries here, and I transformed the subquery to CTE in this example. So in the subquery, you can see we have the main query, which is this, and then we have the subquery. We said subquery is used to get like aggregation and some filtering like that. And then the city here, I said in the city, you always start with, all right? And then you specify your table name as, open your bracket. And now, whatever you're supposed to have in your subquery, which is like wherever you're getting like an aggregation or whatever, is what you will put inside this bracket. And that is exactly what I did. I named this column. That's why I have avg underscore bill. And after you close your bracket, you're now going to write your main query down here. Okay. Now I'm now selecting ID from healthcare and comma, because I'm going to call for this column in this temporary table. So that's why I just did. I'm going to be needing the healthcare data table and also the temporary table, which is the average bills table. Okay. From the healthcare data table, that's where I got the ID from. Remember that in the average bill table, it's only the average bill that I have. So it's from the healthcare data table I got the ID. And from the average bill table, all right, that's where I was able to add this condition in the where clause. Okay. So we now added a condition that where the billing amount is greater than the average bill. If you run it now, you will have exactly the same result. If you run your CTA alone, run only this part alone, you're going to get an error because it expects a main query immediately after the CTE. And this is how CTE generally works. I understand everything I've said in this class. If you don't understand, you can drop a comment to ask your question, or if you are in the paid community, you can let me know so I can explain further. Okay, so let's have one more example on CTE. So you can see one of the business questions we answered using subquery is to calculate the total billing by insurance provider, then select from it, right? So I'm just going to copy this business question and scroll down here so we could answer it using CTE. You already know that our CTE always starts with, then we are going to give it our table name, our temporary table name. Let's just call it bill table or something. Bill table. Okay, then I'll write as, open my bracket, and inside this bracket, I'm going to write in aggregation or whatever I'm trying to extract. So I want to select, so we want to get the insurance provider and also the total billing. That will be the sum of billing, right? So I'm going to select the insurance provider. Okay, and also I'm going to do the sum. Okay, let me indent it so it doesn't get confusing. Okay, so now I can specify where I want to get it from. You know, this one is definitely coming from this healthcare data set because that's where we have this table. So we can say from healthcare, all right? Next, we want to close our CTE bracket. Okay, so we've basically defined it that, okay, we want to create another temporary table called bill underscore table. And the table will contain two columns, the insurance provider column and the total billing from the healthcare data. It's going to extract it, just those two columns from the healthcare data. So this new table will contain only two columns, which is this and this. Okay, so from our temporary table now, we want to now try to get some data out from it. So we can now select, let's say we now want to see only the total billing. So I can just do select total underscore billing. Then I can say from. So now it will be from this table now because total underscore billing does not exist in the healthcare table. All right. And that is why we first defined it. We first extracted it into a temporary table, which is bill table. So I'll do from bill underscore table. So now let's run it. Okay, so the error I made is I'm only running this one. And you know, whenever we are running CTE, you have to run it together from the beginning. Okay, you have to run the main query and the CTE itself together. That's the only way the temporary table works. So we're going to run it now. So we need to group this query. We need to group it by the insurance provider. Okay, so let's run it now. And you can see now, we first defined the one with aggregate to extract it into a temporary table. And then we called for the column we want to see from that temporary table. Here are some of the benefits of CTE. One, it makes our query easier to read. It also breaks down complex logic into steps. It can be reused within the main query, okay? We can reuse it within the main query. And it's perfect for beginners to learn structured thinking. Okay, so now let's move to temporary table. A temporary table is like a real table, but it only lives temporarily until your section ends. You delete it. For example, you know, I have healthcare table that I've been working with severally. That is not a temporary table, that's a real table. If healthcare was like a temporary table, once I close this file and I come back, the table no longer exists, and you can also delete it. You can create temporary table if you want to store immediate results, or you want to reuse the same data across multiple queries. So it's just like for CTEs, we have to run everything together before we can have it. But I could put this inside a temporary table and then call for it anywhere in the query. It can be used to perform multiple operations step by step. Okay, now I'll show you how to create a temporary table in SQL. Okay, so to save time, let's just copy this query right here and save it inside a temporary table. Okay. All right, so we have this query already written and I want to make it a temporary table. I want to save it inside a temporary table. All I have to do right now is immediately after my select query, all right, before you write your from, okay, immediately after the select query, I'm just going to write select into, and then I'm going to start with an hash and I'm going to specify the temp table name. So let me just call it temp table. So this is where you type your temp table name. That's all you have to do. This is the only line you have to add to the query you want to make a table. Okay, let me remove this query. You can see that it's going to give us this result, right? It gives us the insurance provider and the total billing. Now let me run it together with this into hashtag temp table. If I run it, if I run it now, can you see 5 rows affected? All right, so let me do select all. Now I want to check my temporary table. I can do select all from. Remember to always put hash whenever you want to call for that table. All right, if I run it now, you see that the data is now saved in this temporary table, and I can keep using this temporary table anywhere in my data set without having to run everything together like in the CTE that you must run everything together. So at the beginning of my query, if I know that there's a particular extract that I want to make use of consistently in the query, then I can just save it in a temp table and I can keep calling for the temp table anywhere in the data set. That is the idea behind temp table, okay? In summary, you use a subquery when you need a quick calculation or filter. You use a CTE when your query is getting too complex or unreadable, all right? That's when you use CTE. And you use a temporary table when you want to reuse data multiple times in a section or series of steps. All right, make sure you practice everything we've said. If you have any question, drop it in the comments. If you're in the paid community, I'll send you sample data to work with, and then you can send your query to me when you are done writing it so we can double check and brainstorm on it together. I'll see you in the next class, and bye for now.